again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Perry on the fence, 1-1. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
I thought that was Imperial March for a second, but I also don't watch.
No, it was trying to be the like Columbia TriStar movie music where like the horse runs at the screen.
Love it.
Can we just start?
I think that's Paramount.
We're back. Wait, what's the date today? Almost a couple days short of a month from the last show. Last show was May 12th. And I like how at the end of the last show, Stephen and I were like, yeah, we've got a lot of content coming for you guys. We've got a lot of episodes coming up. We're going to start recording a bunch of stuff. We've got draft previews coming up. And
We still do.
We do, yeah, we do. We still have a month.
We just have less time.
Yeah, exactly. So we technically didn't fail you. We've got time. But we're back, and Jason's joined us for today's show. He's back on the pod. Still no Pat, but we're working on it. Hopefully soon. Got some things planned, as we always say. And,
We got a lot of content with Pat coming for you.
don't get him too excited. Come on. We want him to stick around for the next 40
next
50
show.
minutes. Yeah, so. But we got some stuff. We've got, of course, more John Gibson rumors. I don't know how many podcasts we haven't talked about John Gibson trade rumors, probably since the deadline. But we got some more stuff there. Some more trade talk around the league, because in that same article about John Gibson, there was some more trade targets that we can get into and look at any of guys that could be fits for the Ducks. The Ducks made a signing, Pavel Regenda?
Nailed it.
Regenda, yeah. 22-year-old Slovakian forward. We'll get into him a little bit. Steven, you put out a poll today on Pastrnak, Fiala, and Debrincat. So we'll discuss that one, and we'll get into that a little bit. And then we got some NHL talk. Bruce Cassidy fired. Barry Trotz fired. A few other coaching positions open. We go into that in a little bit more detail. We were talking about that briefly before the show here, so I got to try and remember the question that I'm saving for you guys. And then we'll talk playoffs. The Lightning, they won tonight, right? 3-1?
Yeah.
Yep, 3-1. Right at the end there.
3-2 lead to winner faces Colorado in the Stanley Cup Finals. Who are you hoping for? Who you guys want?
Yeah, well, for sure.
Tampa. You okay with the three-peat if it happens?
100%. Barry's on the team. What do I care?
Yeah. That's the only way I'm okay with it, is because Perry's on the team. Other than that, like I hate seeing any team win it back to back, let alone 3 times.
Repeat.
I think it's so rare it's special still.
Yeah, it is.
And especially this will be the first one without an asterisk, so
I hate them a lot less than the other teams who've gotten close.
That was what I was
Pittsburgh,
gonna
Chicago,
say, is
LA, right? Like
I do think the biggest, aside from Perry, the other thing is I feel like they don't get credit for winning the last 2 as much as they should. And if they win this one, then it's like, dude, they did it 3 years in a row.
Yeah, regardless of the asterisks you want to put on it for COVID or whatever. They still.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, because I'd like to see Perry win it. That would be cool. It'd also be fun to see Maroon win 4 in a row with 2 different teams. But then at the same time, I feel like Colorado's due, and a changing of the guard is due. And I'd like to see Cogliano win a Stanley Cup. Josh Manson, meh. But I feel like that team, and with McKinnon and all that, I'd really like to see that. It's been a while, and they've had their heartache, so it feels like they're kind of in that mode.
Yeah, they feel like the next coming team, right? Every time we saw one of the dynasties die, there was another team who kind of took over, and Colorado feels like the team that's right on the cusp of doing that, and maybe the cap space, the cap issues for Tampa might eventually catch up to them. So this is probably, if they win this year, I think the chances of 4 are going to be difficult next year. Unless like Stamkos or Kucherov gets an off-season injury that keeps him out for the entire year, and they can load up on some of these guys, it's going to be tough. But Yeah, I personally, if I had to pick somebody, would probably pick Colorado. I'd like to see it. I feel like they've been right there over the last couple of years. And if any team has looked dominant throughout the entire playoffs so far, it's been them. They've had a easier ride, I guess, with Nashville, and then Mike Smith handing them a few games in Edmonton. But the St. Louis series was fun, and I don't know. They seem like they've done things the right way, which is Tampa has too, right? It's not like they've built it in a way that you can look at and say, oh, that's kind of shady. Other than the cap issues, which I know people like to talk on, but I think if you're looking for pure entertainment, Colorado versus Tampa is probably the best you can get.
Yeah, it's the best outcome, and I don't think there's a loser there. Like, if Colorado wins, I'm not going to be upset, right? It'll be cool to see Nathan MacKinnon get it. I've loved Gabriel Landeskog, like, his entire career, Cogliano, Josh Manson, like, it'll all be great.
Maca.
Yeah, exactly. There's tons of reasons to be happy, but, like, at the same time, like Jay said, 4 in a row from Maroon. Perry finally getting his second one. Like,
because that would be even sadder if Perry loses it 3 years.
Yeah, does he go to Colorado next year if he loses?
Yeah, right. He has his Marian Hossa just continue.
Yeah, exactly.
But it would be really cool. It would be really, really cool to see, and I would be fine with either team because I think both teams play a fun, heavy hockey. Mm-hmm. I think they play with the kind of speed and skill that a lot of like newer or like more progressive fans want. But like they got some boys on those teams that can like still make you feel it. You know what I mean? Like they can play like Nazem Kadri's and he's not a pushover. Like he's going to be out for the rest of whatever. I think he's out for good.
They were. I read an article today. I don't know how far back it was, but they said they're hopeful that he would be back for potential Stanley Cup final game. I don't know when, but
he broke his finger, so that's
I don't think
tough to do.
I was isn't it like right here in the palm of his hand because he can't turn it.
It's gonna be one of those things where he comes back at like 75%, and they just ice the shit out of it and hope that he can play a little bit.
He's going to do the Stamkos thing, where they're going to pray they can get one shift out of him in a game. He can make something special happen, and they're like, "Dude, just go in the back. You put up the greatest career, greatest year of your career. Like you got us here. Like just go fucking sit in the back."
Yeah, no shots, just a lot of passes. Yeah. Get open and find somebody who's open at the back post.
Drive the net.
Yeah. Go out there and just draw penalties. Do what you do best. So, although he has been good offensively, I don't want to get him. I like Kadri.
Yeah, no, exactly.
He's been awesome.
All right, we'll get to that. We got to break down the playoff stuff later, but we got to get to some Ducks news. There's not much, but the main thing is John Gibson. His name keeps jumping up in the trade rumors again. We've been talking about it since the deadline. We finally found out where those rumors came from, right? Steven, you and I did. Did we do a live draft show, a trade deadline show? We did, right?
Yeah.
And we found out that I don't know who reported it that day. So I think it was the fourth period or somebody, but that John Gibson is early. Like the first news we saw on trade deadline day is like keep an eye out on John Gibson. His name's out there. Well, it turns out it was Pat Verbeek who floated the name out there, which is interesting. So Frank Cervelli, in his trade targets article, put John Gibson at number 7. And brief mention in there, he said, quietly Gibson's name circulated among GMs in the days leading up to the March 21st trade deadline, floated by new Ducks manager Pat Verbeek as a lifeline to any teams in need of a netminder. It's a bit interesting that it was brought up from the Ducks rather than other teams calling Anaheim and looking for a netminder. I'm sure there was probably some of that, but...
well, we know Buffalo called early in the year.
Yeah, Buffalo's called for like the last 4 years. And Murray shut him down a couple of times, too.
I don't think it's... Let me say this. It's nice to know where the rumors were coming from, right? If it was someone asking about him or what happened with Verbeek. But I also think it makes a lot of sense, especially, with him coming in right at the deadline, being like, look, I have this guy who, like, theoretically should be one of the 6 or 7 best goaltenders in the league. It's weird everything here. Like, I'm already preparing to trade all these guys that I know I'm going to trade and, get down. Like, it's worth looking at what I can get for this guy and seeing if it makes it worth it, since I, have Dostal. He traded for Cali Lang. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense, and just kind of judge the market, right? Like, he doesn't have 2-3 years of experience where guys are calling him asking about stuff, and he's got a rough ballpark. He's been in Detroit where it's, been a little different. He wasn't the guys getting the calls. So
how confident are you that he gets traded? I know we were fairly confident on the last couple podcasts. None of this is new news, so Cervelli putting him at 7 is basically based on that he was floated around at the deadline. The Ducks aren't good. He's got 3 bad seasons and 3 good seasons under his belt in the last 6 years, so he's right on that cusp like we've talked about. It feels like if he ever gets traded, it's probably this offseason. It's, he gets either traded now or he sticks around in Anaheim, and they are forced to trade him for less later on. Are you still as confident as you were when we talked about it on the last one? And then Jay, how do you feel about it? Do you think he gets traded this offseason?
Just because it's Verbeek, and I don't really know much of his style yet, other than he said what he was going to do, and so he obviously has it in his mind of the direction he wants to take the team. The good news is that we have the pipeline behind Gibson, so it's moving him is not as detrimental as it might have been earlier or in seasons past, because Stolars can easily take over a number 1 spot on this team. And I think at some point, Dostal's gonna have to come in and start doing a backup job. And unless Stolzar, is all of a sudden just better than Dostal eventually takes over from there. And then you got the guys behind him. So we have a lot of commodities and a lot of value at that one position that a lot of teams kind of covet. So especially teams the way they are now, they seem to just be shaking up things at complete random. So maybe I think the best time to pick up a goalie, if you were looking for one, is an off season. It's not at the trade deadline, because generally you're probably fairly solid in goal, or you're gonna take your chances to improve your team somewhere else that isn't so one person makes or break that whole deal, that whole playoff run. So I mean, it's a possibility, but I could also see them just hanging on to him. It's not like he's got a 10-team no trade clause, so it's not like he's going to go to your Arizonas, your Ottawa, somewhere where you'd have a lot of great picks out of it, maybe some prospects somewhere, but it's just also if there's a right fit for what he's worth. Yeah,
there's always only a handful of teams that I think will be interested in John Gibson, not in that he's not a capable player, just a lot of teams already have their goaltending situation figured out for the long term, right? There's a fair amount of teams that he's not going to go to right off the bat because of that. And the fact that he then can eliminate 10 teams makes that difficult, right? Because is a team like New Jersey not on his list, or are they a team he's not willing to go to because of the situation they're in right now? They're along the same path, I guess you could say, as the Ducks. They're in a tough division in the Metro. They are on the up, but they're not quite there yet, right? Is he only willing to go to a team that he knows he's going to make the playoffs? And that's what makes it tough, because I think there are a few teams, and we've looked at them before. I think if Vegas moves on from Lehner, they could be one, but then you have to make that deal within division. I think the Oilers, with the whole Mike Smith situation, could look at John Gibson. But again, you're making that trade in division, which is maybe not something you want to do. We've talked Toronto in the past. It looks like Jack Campbell's not going to go back there, so they're definitely not going to roll into next year with Peter Mrazek as their number 1. And that seems to be the most likely and most talked about trade destination, but I think there's a few others on there as well. But I think the key thing for the Ducks with John Gibson this year is the amount of cap space that they have allows them to get creative with this deal, where you can go to a team and maybe you can sneak a little bit more out of them, and you can go to a team that maybe wouldn't be able to fit his cap space normally, but you take on a really bad contract to make it work. So I think it was Steven, you had brought this up as one of those out there scenarios with Florida. In Bobrovsky coming back or something like that, and in a team, and not to say that's definitely out there in the suggestion, but the Ducks having the flexibility to take on a massive contract like that to get John Gibson to a team that normally it'd be impossible for them to go out and get him, and they get out from under that Bobrovsky contract. I don't know if I would want that Bobrovsky contract in Anaheim for the next 7 years or something, but.
I think it's got like 5 more, because he signed for 7 years.
It's like 9 million or
no 10 million. I think he got a 7 year, 70 million.
10.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's unreal. But like they're in that situation. I think they have $39 million in cap space going into the offseason. So you can go to those teams that are up against the cap, like Toronto, and take on a bunch of salary to make it work. I think they do have some flexibility where it kind of makes it the right time if you're gonna do it to go out and move them.
Yeah, and like I said when I brought it, like when we talked about the Bobrovsky thing, the point I was making is like, would you eat that to get Lundell in the door?
Yeah. Because
that's the quality of prospect that you have to get to make that pill. Like there has to be a lot of sugar to make that swallow. Like it is insane to me. But like if it's Lundell, if it's Lundell and Bobrovsky, and you're sending, Gibby the other way, like shot, yeah, okay, fine. Like we'll figure out what the rest of the deal is because Lundell, like I don't think Lundell on his own is enough to give up Gibby and take back Bobrovsky. But like I think that regardless of how it gets built, that's the foundation you're fine with. As far as Gibson trade, like. It kind of brings me to something that I've been thinking about. Like, I feel like I'm kind of going crazy because I feel like you two specifically, the last time we were all on, made mention to me that you think there's some possibility. And then I feel like a lot of things on Twitter right now, we've been seeing a lot of people talk about how optimistic they think Anaheim can be this summer with some of the names that they can go get. And we'll get to that, the poll and stuff. But, like, if you bring some of those guys in, you can't give up John Gibson.
Yeah.
So that I think that, to me, is kind of the thing is...
it depends, I think, who you bring in.
I would feel much more confident saying John Gibson gets traded this summer if I didn't feel like so many other people who I don't think are stupid, like who are smart people, like they just seem to think that there's something... that could be, and maybe that's, a move that you make for 2 years from now, right? It's the kind of thing where you get a guy on like the last year of his ELC or something. But if you're going to go out and get like a Fiala or a Forsberg or, make a run at Nazem Kadri, it's a ridiculous idea, but I'm just saying you have to keep John Gibson. And so the fact that I feel a little on an island, I guess, as far as like how exciting I expect this summer to be in the short term, makes it hard for me to be much more confident there. But like I would still say I'm, 75-80% sure he's going to get traded.
Yeah. I think you can still go out and make a move like that. Just depends on, and still get rid of John Gibson. Like both can happen. I think it depends on who you bring in. Like we've talked about, like Forsberg, Pastrnak. Like when you're getting guys around 27, 28, I think then it makes it impossible to bring in a guy like that and move out John Gibson. I think if you're bringing in, Fiala's 25, if you're, we've talked the Tkachuk stuff to death, and there's no substantial evidence behind that. But if you are to bring in a guy like Tkachuk, I think you can still bring in a guy like that and move John Gibson. I don't necessarily think those two can exist. I think it just depends on the age and the type of player that you're bringing in, because the younger guys like that can still fit in your time frame where you can wait a little bit. Maybe you bring in a 1B to play with Stolarz, and you give Dossel some time to get there at that point, and you get something good in return for John Gibson. Move him to New Jersey and get the second overall pick, or you move him to Toronto and you bring in some younger players, or God forbid you go out and get a William Nylander or something like that, where you add in a different position and you wait for some of your prospects to come up. I just think with a lot of the moves the Ducks have done, it and then the fact now that it's Verbeek who floated the name around at the deadline, it kind of points to John Gibson's time coming to an end, and the fact that he'd be a little bit more willing to go out the door now with 3 tough seasons behind him, and him getting a little bit closer to 30 now. So yeah, but I completely agree. Like, it is a situation where you in some cases you can't have both. Like, if you're bringing in a Pastrnak, you would want John Gibson to be there to get the best years out of him and still be a competitive team. So you got to get creative with it to make both work. And
yeah, like, I was looking at it right now because, like, I was trying to think, like, could you do both at the same time? And, like, because if you bring back a Mrazek, or if you bring back, like, a Cam Talbot, you're not bringing back a world beater, but you're bringing back a guy that can eat 35, 40 games in a regular season. Like, he can just eat 40 starts and you're fine.
Wow.
Is that enough? Like, is Cam Talbot and Kevin Fiala enough to be like, or is Cam Talbot good enough to be like, we could bring Kevin Fiala in now? Cam Talbot's only got 1 year. We got Stolarz. We got Dostal. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe it is.
I just don't understand why move Gibson. I feel like if you move Gibson, it's to open up that tunnel of talent that you have. Stolarz deserves that chance to be a number one and prove it. Whether he's going to be with us for the long term or not, probably not. But at least let him get out there, prove it, and then build up his asset. Because the real name of the game here is Dostal. We're just waiting for that. You don't necessarily need to run him into backup this upcoming season. Let him still be a starter, get 1 more year there. Then he's been there plenty of time, and he's probably done all he's going to do or learn all he's going to learn from that position. Then move him into the backup role. You have your Stolzar or someone else. I don't understand getting rid of Gibson, bringing back a goalie, plus some other people.
Because you still
here.
need 2 goalies. That's my thing. Cam Talbot isn't going to be your starter
season as well.
Yeah, like, if you bring back Mrazek or you bring back Talbot, that's to back up Stolarz. The question is what if Stolarz isn't ready, or what if he's not as good as we think he is? You need somebody there, because you don't want to, now all of a sudden you're scrambling and you don't have anything. That's how you end up with, Jason LaBarbera getting like 6 starts in March or some shit. I think that's the thing for me, is it's not to bring in a guy to be the starter. It's bringing in a capable journeyman who can eat starts if things go left with Stolarz, which could be an injury or whatever.
I think Verbeek was more or less probably just going like, hey, throwing it out there. Anyone want to take the big bite at this and make me just a whole lot better by taking him at the last minute? And, what I think he wants to do is not necessarily go and shop him all the time. He was maybe taking a stab at it. And now it's almost like, well, unless you blow my socks off, I got no problem keeping him, because it really doesn't matter. Because if I bring someone back, it's only for a season, and maybe I revisit this at the trade deadline next year, coming up on the next trade deadline. And then same thing, someone maybe overpays for it, or they got a goalie who's injured late in the season and before the trade deadline, and Gibson's available. So, maybe that's it. Maybe he's trying to get it, but I think he was trying to get his assets, but now I think he's a buyer. I mean, I think he's just going to either try and make trades happen, not necessarily involving Gibson, but a lot of the draft picks and prospects that we have. And I'll throw in a couple of free agent signings in there as well. And this team can get better, but I don't even know if he really wants to get better this next season, if he wants to kind of just let everything hang out and see where we get in the next draft, and then go from there.
I think everything he said and the signs point towards sticking with the rebuild for now. I respect what everybody's saying, and I can see it, and it makes sense for the Ducks to go out and add. They're going to have to add players, because they need to add anywhere from 15 to 10 million to get to the floor. Even with signing the RFAs that they have, and 3 of them are eligible for arbitration. So who knows how that's going to go. I think for Sam Steele, there's not much of a case to make, but for Lindstrom and Milano, if they go to arbitration, I think the Ducks would like to avoid that. So, but either way, they're going to have at least around 10 million to get to the floor. So they're going to have to sign guys. But the problem is, like, I think you can do that without sacrificing the rebuild, or you can go out and acquire bad contracts. You can go to Montreal and take Weber's contract and go to another team and take on a bad contract. We saw him trying to do that with Dadonov at the deadline, and that deal fell apart. You don't necessarily have to go out and get Forsberg to add to eat up that cap space. You can
Mm-hmm.
you can get assets, younger assets, picks, prospects by taking on a bad contract to get to that floor and still kind of continue in that process. The thing for me with John Gibson and why it kind of feels like the writing's on the wall again is they're at that kind of threshold point where the last 3 seasons haven't been great, but he had 3 really good seasons before that. And now you're getting into this tipping point where this is now like the make or break season. Is he going to have a really good season? Going to have a really bad season? Because whatever season he has this year, he's now had more of either good seasons or bad seasons in the last 7 years. And I think it gets tougher the longer you wait to move him. I don't think he's a deadline day move. I think it's too hard to get what you want for him and to move him with his cap hit and the term he has at the deadline. I think it's a better primed deal for this offseason. And I think with the assets that are out there for teams that are looking for a goaltender, as long as John Gibson's willing to go there, I think there are some interesting assets for the Ducks to go out and look at. We've talked Kevin Fiala. We've talked potentially William Nylander. Who knows what the Devils situation are if John Gibson wants to move a little bit closer to home. They're a team that's definitely on the up, and they're shopping that number 2 overall pick. A very good way to accelerate the rebuild is to move a guy like John Gibson out the door and bring in that 2nd overall pick and have number 2, number 10, and number 22 potentially. If you don't have to move another pick out back in that door, I'd imagine the Ducks would have to add to that to get the 2nd overall pick. But there are ways I think you can continue this rebuild, and really the only big piece they have left that you can move out the door is John Gibson, right? Like they're not going to move Fowler, and there's really no other major piece now left that is going to fetch you anything. Henry could get you something, but it's not going to get you a lot. Silverberg's not going to get you anything at this point.
Silverberg's going to retire a Duck. There's nothing unless he suddenly recovers as far as his athleticism and his health. I just think he's going to end his career as a Ducks.
Or at least see out that contract.
Yeah,
and that's
he's earned it. I love Jacob Silverberg. I'll defend that dude all day. I thought he was a perfect player for us. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that he's earned the right to just play that contract out.
I think if anything, if this John Gibson trade is going to happen, it's going to happen at the draft or shortly after it. I can't imagine they go into a couple weeks into free agency and make the trade then. It's one that happens within the next month and a half, or it doesn't happen and he's a Duck for the next season. This is not a mid-July, August type deal. I just can't see that happening. The draft seems the most likely situation, but we'll have to see. I mean, it's going to be eventful. This is what pretty much everybody's talking about right now, is how exciting this offseason is going to be, how it has the potential to be a big offseason for the Ducks. But we've been in that position before with Bob Murray, so it is a bit different, where we expect big things and then nothing happens. But the thing we at least know, again, is the fact that they have so much cap space. They have a lot of weapons to go out and do things. At the very least, they're going to have to make some moves to hit the cap floor. So we're going to see something happen. It might be just a couple, cap dumps from other teams, or some veteran UFA forwards that they bring in to hit the floor. But at the very least, something's going to happen. So we'll see. We got time.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what people would consider a good off season for the Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your minimum, or do you need a big name? If there's not a big name, a bunch of small names, it's just oh good, another off season where we're expecting and got a little less than anything.
Well, shit, then let's just do that. Jay, what is a good off season to you? I think that's a really
swap teams with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Swap teams. Get them out of cap hell.
We'll take your $9 million goalie.
Not a problem. I mean, I don't know. The Ducks are in such a unique spot that they haven't really been in the fact that they got really emerging elite talent. And really, we are now going to have the core that we've had for so long gone, the face of the franchise gone, It seems like turmoil with Gibby. Doesn't seem too happy to be playing here. So now that goalie's gone, and then it's like, all right, well, crap, where are we going? What parts are we looking at? You can only go by with what Verbeek has been saying, and that's faster, bigger, stronger. I guess that's what everyone wants, but how do you go about getting it?
Or the $6 million man.
My key is I want to see who's going to get on defense, because there's no way we can roll the 6 defensemen we have and hope to have any success. And I think Shattenkirk's he's a trade deadline move. So I mean, at this point, we're the only names I'm super familiar with right now are Shattenkirk, Fowler, and Drysdale. So other than that, not that those guys Mahura could be fine, but I mean that's god awful, especially if you move out Shattenkirk. So I feel like you're going to need to get somebody back there on defense, if not two, moving forward. So,
what about you, Ed?
Yeah, for me it's a mix of a couple things. I think trading John Gibson, for me, this just feels like the right time to get it done. I feel like it's a relationship that's kind of gone past the wayside at this point. I think you can still get a decent return for him at this point. And then it's just being in the mix for some of these younger players that could be available. The Kevin Fiala's, getting him potentially in a trade, a little bit of a friendlier deal in the sense that you're trading for his rights, so that could be something that you don't have to give up as much. We've talked Matthew Tkachuk potentially being around that if the opportunity presents itself. Alex Debrincat, who seems to be available now. I don't know why the Blackhawks are looking to move him, but his name's everywhere.
We got him. I'd call that a win. Got that up.
Or at least just being involved in those conversations. I know it's hard to judge that because we're not really going to hear too much about whether the Ducks are how involved they are or not. But a successful offseason for me would be just either getting one of those guys or just being involved in those conversations and looking to make the team better if it makes sense to pull the move off. We've heard that from Verbeek already. Like, he can make this team. If he can make this team better and it makes sense, they're going to do it. And Jacob Chikrin again potentially being in that. I'd rather some of the forwards we've already discussed, like a Debrincat or a Fiala or something like that. But yeah, it would be trading John Gibson, getting some assets in return. My favorite would be getting the second overall pick from New Jersey and having 2 top 10 picks, and then to either use some of those picks to go out and get one of those guys, or just end up drafting 2 really good young players in the top 10 here and continuing with the rebuild. So I'm more on that side of things. And
draft some picks.
Yeah.
Draft some picks.
Or prospects and just continuing with the rebuild, because I can't see them being a top destination where they can add a bunch of these guys this offseason. Add a Forsberg, go out and add another, good right shot defenseman like Klingberg or something like that, and still, being a competitive team with just those 2 additions next year and being better than Colorado or being better than, St. Louis or some of the top teams in the Western Conference. Like, I don't think they're at that point yet. I think it would be a little bit premature to go out and do that. It's why I don't like that the Kings did it. A lot of people are giving the Kings praise for going out and doing that. I feel like they jumped the gun with that. I really do, with some of the signings that they made. I don't think that's going to pan out long term. That they're banking on a lot of these young guys panning out over the next couple of years and trying to capitalize on the tail end of Kopitar and Doughty. I don't think it's going to work out for them. I don't think they are going to be better than some of the top teams in the Western Conference, that they're going to make a legitimate run at the Stanley Cup, and they're going to get to a point where Kopitar and Doughty are past their prime, and they've got Deneau at like 33, 34 years old, and Arvidsson and all these other guys, and they're going to have to kind of reset and go, not into a rebuild, but move out some of these guys and start retooling a bit. So I don't want the Ducks to do that. I don't think they're ready for that. I don't want them to be in that same situation that the Kings are, and just trying to make the playoffs for the sake of making the playoffs and then losing in the first or second round to a team that's done it properly and built it up the right way.
Are you talking about Edmonton?
Yeah, team that's built it up probably. No.
They lost to Everton. Yeah, it took them a long time to get that one right.
Yeah,
they had a draft. Jesus.
I didn't like the Deneau deal or the Arvidsson trade, really for the same reasons that you didn't. But like seeing the way it worked out I actually have become a big fan of it. And I think the thing to remember is Kopitar's deal's up in 2 years. he doesn't have one of those long ass contracts like Doughty does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think right around the time that his contract's up, like they're gonna know what Byfield is.
Yeah,
And
but
like
you're gonna have to
Byfield
hope that
isn't
he
guy-
is that, right? That's
right,
the
but
problem.
I don't think it's. Here's the thing, right? It didn't cost them anything to find out, other than they spent what, $10 million in top six forwards to try to get the most out of the end of Kopitar being really good. Like I don't know that I can disagree with that.
My
thought
thing
they
is, how
played
many
well
years
in the
does that
first-
cost you, right? How many years does that cost you in
It's going to
potentially
take him
getting
a couple of
another,
years anyway, so why not?
getting
I
a
mean,
couple more top picks this year to chase the
Right.
playoffs, make it to the first round and lose, to just try and do something with the tail end of Kopitar? Because when Kopitar is gone, this team is not good. When Doughty is
Right, but-
gone, this team is not good.
if Byfield is the guy he can be, that's my thing, right? Like basically what they've done is they've said, we're pretty confident that we can make Byfield a legitimate number one center. We can help him develop into that, use his tools. And if he does that, right around the time Kopitar is done, he'll be in that, 20 years old, 21-year-old range. And it'll be his turn to really step in. And what you'll see is something similar-esque, I guess, to, you could say like the Scheifele Wheeler thing, or you could look at it as the Stamkos Point thing. You know what I mean? Where like Stamkos is still there, and like he's still the captain, it's still his team, but like Brayden Point has kind of become a number one center. And I think the Kings had enough equity in quality prospects that the risk overall was relatively low to try to make another run with two guys who are probably going to get their numbers retired about 10 minutes after they retire.
The other thing is getting all those high draft picks, and then, all of a sudden, it sounds like you want a team that's full of 25 or younger that are making that push. Then it's there. But the problem is when they all start doing well and they're all really talented, you end up can't keeping those guys for very long. You got to pick and choose anyways. So you're always going to have that mixture of veterans and younger guys. And, if you are a team that is going to suck completely, then fine, get your high draft picks, but do it for a season or two. Don't extend that longer than it needs to. And I would say, adding in these pieces that at least gives them, other, I hate to say, players to look up to, but to learn how to play, how to be professional, how to win, how to have the right attitude, that sort of deal helps those young players progress better. And then as they go off to the wayside and that core gets better, you add other pieces that are a little bit closer to that age and that window that you have.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think it's the worst deal ever, bringing in Duno and Arvidsson and some of the guys they brought in. Like it's not the worst deal ever by any means. For me personally, if I would have rather waited the couple years to see what you have in Byfield before making that decision and bringing in those guys and locking yourself into a 5-year contract. I don't think Duno is going to be awful in 4 or 5 years. I just think you jumped the gun a little bit to just make the playoffs. We were all surprised that the Kings finished where they were, right? No, I don't think a lot of people had them making the playoffs. They were kind of an outside chance, and they made it. But most people expected them to be one of the teams that missed it, and there's a few teams like Vegas who choked, and the Kings got into a playoff spot because of it. I just felt like it was a couple years premature to go out and make some of those signings, and you're not so much doing it to nurture the young kids and wait for them or whatever. You're doing it because you've got Kopitar, you've got Doughty, you've got Brown, you're trying, you got Quick. So let's see if we can get something out of this last couple of years that's not, bottom 5 in the league, right? Like not tanking. Let's and I think making the playoffs was a success for them. I think if they admitted making the playoffs was a success for them, they'd rather make the playoffs this year and have that optics of making the playoffs versus finishing, bottom 5 and getting a top 5 pick. I know you, like, I definitely agree with you. I don't think you can have a team full of young 25-year-old top prospects and win a cup. You can't. I don't think it's a bad situation to have if they all hit and you have to move some of those guys out to bring in some of those veterans in. I would rather be in that situation that, hey, all these guys panned out. That's great. We can't afford to keep all of them. Move some guys out, bring in some veteran players, build your roster that way when it's time for that, when you know the next step beyond having these young players is, okay, we can compete. Byfield's going to carry us. He's our next, Kopitar. Turcotte's going to come in and be a really good second-line center. Kaliev is going to be our 30-goal scorer. Brant Clark's going to come in and be our new Doughty. Like, a couple years down the road when you know what you have, right? Because we're waiting. We're waiting to see, is Byfield... I think Byfield's going to be a great player, but you don't know yet. I think Brant Clark's going to be a great player. You don't know yet. It's not a bad thing to get another top 5, top 10 pick, bring in another guy to have another shot at it in case these guys pan out. Because look at Alex Turcotte. I would say right now it's not looking great for him, the way things have gone. He was a 3rd overall pick. To get more of those and have some more shots on it. Did he? I thought he was 3rd.
No, he went like 6.
Well, if any of you are just joining us, this is a Kings podcast, and we really want to thank you.
But yeah, my whole point is I don't want the Ducks to jump the gun here and go after a Forsberg or somebody like that, and just to make the playoffs, because I don't think even with like a Forsberg and another right shot defenseman and a few other kind of middle 6 UFAs that they are a team that's good enough to compete with the top teams in this league. I don't think they're there yet. I think in a couple years they could be, but we would need to wait. Just like the Kings need to wait to see what Byfield is, we need to wait to see what McTavish is. We need to wait to see what Zellweger is. We need at least another season for Zegras to develop, Terry to have another, not just the one breakout season to prove that this is consistent from him. That's what I would want to see. I want to see these guys play. I want to see these guys play big minutes. I don't want to see them shove down the lineup to bring in another guy to try and compete just yet. In 2 or 3 years, fine. Go out, get some guys, trade some of the young guys if you want to bring in those pieces when you know what you have and you know that these young guys are going to be the main core piece of your roster. And that's what you see. The main core pieces, these teams waited. Colorado's main core pieces, Rantanen, McKinnon, Landeskog, Makar. Then they bring in everybody else. They bring in Kadri. They bring in Burakovsky. They bring in Devin Taves with the prospects and picks that they don't need anymore because they've got that core that they know that those guys are going to lead the team. Tampa's got Point and Stamkos and Kucherov and Vasilevsky and Hedman. Their core that they drafted, brought through, waited to see what they were. Then they brought in everybody else through trades or whatever to the team when they knew they were ready to make that next step, and they had those guys to build around. That's what I want to wait to see till we get to that point. Wait till Zegras and McTavish and Zellweger and Drysdale and Dostal or whoever are the core of this team. Then we can go out and move whoever and add guys in and fill the rest of the roster and start signing UFAs to really take that next step forward.
I don't want to go another season of unwatchable hockey.
Nobody does, but you might have to.
It.
It might be the best thing for the Ducks in the long run.
Yeah, it's
Turcotte was drafted 5th, by the way. So
you're both wrong.
Yeah,
you were closer. Either way, it's not working out for him. It's not looking great that it's a 5th round pick. So
yeah, he got called out by Mark Lazarus too, which is very funny.
Did he? For what?
Yeah.
Just for not being good?
Well, just for so far not developing. But he also called out Kirby Dack too, so it's not like he's being an asshole. He was just talking about with all the love that Edmonton and Colorado are getting for kind of tanking and having their high-end prospects. He's like, there's also the part where you have to make sure you pick those guys. And there's really no reason Cale Makar should have dropped to them, but he did, right? Yeah. Which means people passed on him and made the wrong decision, and that kind of stuff. And he was like, look, Turcotte could still be good, but it hasn't been great so far. And after him was Caulfield, and after him was Zegras, and after him was, Boldy or whatever. Same thing with Kirby Dack. He's been fine for what, for his age and stuff like that, but he hasn't necessarily been the guy that they thought they were drafting. Yeah. Which is why they're in a position to say things that are out loud that are stupid, like, we'll trade Alex Debrincat.
Well, speaking of Alex Debrincat, you had a poll today with you're looking at 3 different players: David Pastrnak, Kevin Fiala, Alex Debrincat, right?
Yeah.
And their viability for the Ducks, who our fans would rather have, what they would not be willing to give up, what piece they would really not be willing to give up. I think it was this year's first, next year's first, top 1 protected, Mason McTavish and Olen Zellweger, right? Were the 4 pieces you put up. I think Mason McTavish won by a landslide, right? Of who?
Oh, to protect, yeah.
Who people were not willing to give up among those 4 assets.
Very funny.
What was the winner? Was it Pastrnak for the
Better be
Overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly, people wanted Pastrnak. So far, Fiala at 14, Pastrnak at 42. Oh no, Debrincat at 44 now.
Oh, the Debrincat.
What I would go with.
Yeah,
Which player do you think will be the most impactful over the next 5 years? Pastrnak 61, Debrincat 33, Fiala 6, and
That's
then
fair.
the guessing the players based on our PM chart. Don't trade Mason McTavish. Do trade the 10th pick. Yeah, that's where we're at. So there's still a few more hours left on this, I think. Like probably, I don't know. I got this up at. Okay, so there's like literally 12 more hours. 9:38 this morning. But it was just kind of, because Pasternak's name has been out there as far as, Boston's hand maybe forced. Like Cassidy just threw everything for a loop. Nobody knows what to think now. And given that it seems to show a level of instability, and given the fact that, Pasternak's two best friends, apparently, Krejci and Torrey Krug, were not necessarily treated with all the respect in the world on the way out the door, in his opinion. The idea that Pastrnak might resign is decreasing, right?
Yeah.
Like in theory, it could be harder to convince him to stay. Alex Debrincat, obviously, we heard, he came up in Saravalli's trade thing today. We've heard his name even back all the way at the deadline as like Debrincat's name is out there. It doesn't make sense, but kind of it is. And then, Kevin Fiala is a player that I think had a wonderful year, and a lot of people look at his age and what he could maybe be, and his ability to kind of drive a second line away from Terry or away from Zegras, or play with Zegras, and be a special player. So that's kind of why it ended up with those three. And then I was able to figure out what people felt about like trade assets and stuff, because I'm always super fascinated by like what people do or don't want to give away, and I was pretty impressed, or not impressed, but like happy to see everybody was like, no, keep McTavish, because I've told you this, dude, I'm losing my mind over this kid. Like, it's obnoxious. Like, I think he has a chance to be a really, really special player, and the idea of passing on that really kind of hurts. To get something that maybe isn't the most, sustainable conceptually.
Boston's it's gonna be for King's ransom. So I just don't see any way that you're gonna be able to swing that without giving up everything, prospect and draft pick wise.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree.
The Brinket's a little bit easier because they got a lot of openings that they need to fill, and that's what she said. But that they are looking to become a better team, anyways, in the short term, where it looks like Boston's looking to get into that rebuild run. So it's they're kind of going opposite ways.
Yeah, where like I think Chicago is more likely to take any of whether it's young players that are on the cusp, guys like Perreault, to take draft picks. Like they're just looking for young players and picks. Boston, I have no idea where they are at this point. Like, it looks like they're going into a rebuild. I don't even know what a Pastrnak trade would look like, but it would be the most expensive of all these guys here. And I think Debrincat is fairly close to David Pastrnak. I think Pastrnak, because of Boston being good over the last couple of years, he gets a lot more hype than being around a couple more seasons than Debrincat. But I feel like they're fairly similar players. And just for that, the fact that it would cost a little bit less to get a guy like Alex Debrincat, he'd be the guy I go for. But they're not too far different in age too. I think Pasternak's a year and a half older. He just turned
18
20,
months.
just turned 26 in May. I thought he was older than that. And Debrincat
Me
turns 25 in December. So they're about a year and a half difference, which isn't too crazy. And then Fiala's right in the middle of them. He's 25. I was supposed to say by far the worst player of them, but I do think he's a bit underrated. He is a guy who can score 30 to 40 goals. You put him on the line with Trevor Zegras. He would be the cheapest of the bunch. Right now he's a pending RFA, so you can work that to your advantage. I think he's the most realistic option, but if I had to pick who I'd want the most, I think it would be a slight edge to Alex Debrincat, just because I think he's a bit cheaper than Pastrnak, and I like the fit of him a little bit more.
Who's Chicago's goalie?
Kevin Lankinen, I think.
I don't think they have one.
Well, they not a real good one. So
yeah.
there's a spot where maybe Gibby fits in.
I can't imagine.
Oh, that's
though.
an interesting trade. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but I like it. No, and I don't mean that way. I just mean like trading a 24-year-old to bring in a goaltender, but you're like, they did just fucking trade for Seth Jones, and he's making a shit ton of money. So like, they have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
They gotta start being competitive. Otherwise, that Jones signing looks dumb on top of it. Plus,
just so stupid.
Getting to the end of that Kane where he's serviceable. So it's like, they haven't had
He's going to Buffalo one day anyway.
So
he's going home.
I just want to say, I think Pastrnak is one of the 3 or 4 best wings in the league. Like, I think he's incredible. I think he's not a big guy, but he's a little bit bigger. He plays a little bit more physical game. He's which I think comes from being in Boston. Like, and it's really hard to be on a team that has Brad Marchand, who throws himself at 150 miles per hour into anything that moves, and be like, actually, I don't really kind of like hitting. It's not really my thing. It's like, no, that's not how this works here. Like, everybody hits. And, I think he's solid defensively. I think there's some questions about how good defensively he is because he has played with Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron for most of his career, if not all of it. So, like, I get that there are concerns there about how good he actually is, what his individual impact or ability is. But I am with you in that I would go for Debrincat because, like you said, he's a little bit younger. I think he fills a definitive role, right? I mean, it's stupid, but it's kind of just trading for Cole Caulfield. Right? You're trading for a shorter guy who you think can just fill the back of the net and who is on a timeline that you could put him next to what seems to be an incredible playmaker and just be like, yeah, this makes sense.
We talked about it before. It allows you to shift Terry down and drive a second line. Gives you a bit more flexibility that way. I
Terry McTavish, Debrincat, and Seagrass. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You can talk yourself into that one pretty quickly. So.
Why can't you?
All right, so that's it for the trade talk, I guess. Unless you guys have any last couple things.
We got
to
like 5 minutes left before Jay's got to go. So I just want to ask you guys this insane question, and you guys tell me how you feel. Would you trade John Gibson, Mason McTavish, and the 10th overall pick for Carey Price and Shane Wright, and the first overall pick? No.
Carey Price is done.
Oh, I'm not. I don't think.
Yeah,
he's
it's just
good.
to take the cap.
But you're not getting Shane. You're not getting the number 1 overall pick without taking Carey Price.
McTavish and who? Sorry, again.
And the 10th pick or Comtois. I'm torn between those two. I think you could. I would think everybody would be like, oh yeah, Comtois, but like at the same time, like Shane Wright. Like, I think it's got to be the 10th pick as well.
Yeah, it's tough.
I don't know what Shane Wright is. I've got a better idea of what McTavish is versus Wright, and just look at what everyone thought Lafreniere was going to be, although he's doing well now, but it's taken a while. Or Kakko was supposed to be, look at what he's doing now. So it just adds a little hard to give up your 10th for first, plus throw in a great prospect, and then throw in your goalie for taking on cap.
Yeah. For me, like, the difference from right now, like, Wright's it's projected to be the better player over Mason McTavish. But the difference between them right now, I don't think is made up for what you could get, one, drafting whoever you want at 10, and then what you could get for John Gibson. I think taking whoever you get at 10 and whatever you could get in a separate trade for John Gibson, I think all those together with McTavish puts you in a better spot than just having Shane Wright. That's what the tipping point is for me. And yeah, I have more confidence in Shane Wright being a superstar in this league than Mason McTavish. But literally every time I watch Mason McTavish play, I get a bit more comfortable that he's going to eventually be a all-star in this league. Like, he's that good right now, where he's quickly dispelled the worries people had of the obvious links between Nick Ritchie playing for the same team, being a big kid with skating deficiencies and a hard shot. He's taken that and just left it in the dust. Like, he is probably the most dominant player in junior hockey, and he doesn't have to score 4 or 5 points a night. Like, that's just not the role he plays right now. He's a second line shutdown center for that team that up until this last They're in the finals right now, the OHL finals. They had not lost a game. Like they went 12-0 in the playoffs, and he was a big part of that. I think he's their second leading scorer. Takes all the tough draws, all the tough assignments, plays against the opposition's top players. He's a man amongst boys in that league, and it's not even close. He doesn't have to put up the most points to be the best player down there. So, yeah, it's tough to move on from that right now when you look at what you could get there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. No, I get that. I just, I think there's something to be said for being like, we have Wright and Zegers for the next 10 years, and that's, at the end of the day, we'll deal with anything else.
All right. We only got 5 minutes. We got to mention it. We're not going to talk about it long because there's not really much to talk about. The Ducks did make a signing. Pavel Regenda, 2-year entry-level contract. 6'4", 22-year-old Slovakian forward. Played well at the Olympics. And at the men's worlds, he had a goal and 4 points in 7 games at the Olympics. 5 goals and 6 points in 8 games at the men's worlds. I like it. Like, it's not bad. It's the signings you probably should make. He was one of the top scorers in the top tier of Slovakian hockey. Something the Ducks don't really have in a big, skilled, physical power forward right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I guess, what you kind of hope Comtois would be. Add him to the mix, see what he can do. If not, play him in San Diego. Like, I like it. I like these types of signings. I mean, not many of them ever really pan out. They always generate a lot more hype than the player ends up putting up production on the ice, but it's a gamble. He's played well recently, and it looks to be a guy that you could plug in the lineup and see what he could do.
Yeah, I would like him, especially to go down with injuries. I think it's a little bit easier to try and bring in a guy who's got that size to him, and that always seems easier to plug in those people than the guys who are lighting it up offensively, and you try and get them to quickly transition in the case of an injury or a call-up to try and recreate that. And sometimes that's a little bit more difficult, but a big guy probably wouldn't have to play that many minutes if he does get the call-up. Like I said, if he does do well, then he's someone that can just kind of give us depth at the big club and just kind of cycle in and out. Just depends how he does.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a very, very low risk, incredibly high reward. You know what I mean? Like, best case scenario, he turns into a Hall of Famer. Worst case scenario, he plays out the next 2 years in the minors and you never see him again. And you're like, oh, okay, we paid him, $60,000. Well, okay, but that's the other thing I wanted to say that I think is actually so much better than the Cody Curran thing, because Cody Curran, they went and signed a 30-year-old fucking defenseman. Yeah. For a 2-year deal at $1 million, and then never fucking did anything with him. Which, like, whatever. Like, I don't necessarily care, but it's you signed a 30-year-old. So if you weren't going to move him up immediately, what was the potential upside there? What were you thinking you were going to get? Whereas with this dude, he's 22. It's like, fuck it, dude. I'll keep signing you to 1-year deals as long as I think there's something there and you want to be here. Like, who cares? There's just, it's all, for the grossest way to say it, I guess, it's all profit. Like, you have almost nothing to lose.
He's got all the signs of potential late bloomer. A big kid kind of growing into the skill set over the next couple of years.
100%. But I also think, like, it doesn't matter if he doesn't, right? Yeah. This is the kind of thing, to me, that means more than, any comment about, well, we have a lot of picks and we have a lot of prospects and we're going to be creative when opportunities arise. That's one thing, but like to just be like, yeah, we're just gonna go take a flyer on this kid who we just saw play at the Worlds and he was fine. Like, fuck it, let's see what happens. He just made it the Olympic team. It's Slovakia, but it's Slovakia. Like, it's not nothing. Like, he was at the Olympics. Screw it. Let's see what he's got. Yeah. And I just like it. It's just another lottery ticket. Fuck it. See what happens.
You guys got a lot of feelings on this very minor signing.
Hey, when you don't have any news, you gotta get excited about something.
To me, it's more about what it represents. Like, I don't fucking know this dude from Adam, right? Like, he could walk next to me on the sidewalk, and I would have no idea that it was him. Like, I'm not, you don't. Yeah, he could be a Hall of Famer. We never know. But I just think the thought process behind it is incredibly encouraging, and it's a little bit more of putting some skin in the game, I guess, or or
Yeah.
being about it instead of talking about like, oh, we're gonna look for anybody we can. Oh, okay, thanks.
All right. We're up to the hour mark now. Jay, I'll leave this up to you. I know you got to head out soon. Do you want to discuss Bruce Cassidy, Barry Trotz now, or do you want to save it for this potential Sunday podcast we're doing with the four of us and get Pat involved on this discussion too?
I'd really like to get Pat involved because I want to watch him get mad. Boston or the Islanders are involved in anyways, and then his blood pressure starts getting a little high. Starts sweating, gets red.
All right, that works out. Yeah, because I mean we're gonna treat it. I think we were aiming for a Sunday morning. So it's not gonna be. Well, we could be, I guess, but it's not technically gonna be Pucks and Brews. But the topics are gonna be kind of that. So we can look at the playoffs, we can look at the coaching stuff, cover some NHL stuff. Yeah. Yeah, no, not a lot of Pavel Regenda talk on Pucks and Brews. Yeah, we'll do a complete deep dive on Pavel Regenda and why he could be Slovakia's best player in their entire history. So better than Marian Hossa. Yeah, so we're aiming for Sunday for that one. I don't want to get you guys' hopes up, but it could happen. It would be Pat's first show in a few months. So, and the first time in a while since the four of us have been together. I think the last time all four of us were together, Steven said some not so nice things about JT Brown. And that's why we haven't been together ever since. Bad things happen when the four of us get together.
I hate you so much. I hate you.
It was insane.
I honestly do think that's the last time we were together. Was that all four of us? Was that
the Kraken game?
The live stream game? Yeah. We
so upset that he protested ever coming back on the podcast.
Pat was.
This is all. So mad.
We got letters from the FCC. Children are watching this.
We've said worse.
Yeah.
that podcast doesn't exist anymore. So if you weren't there, then you don't know what we're talking about.
I hate everybody right now.
Now it's just a myth, and you can think whatever you.
I love you, JT Brown. Don't ever forget that.
But yeah, that does it for the show. We'll likely be back in another month because we have to be back before that because we got draft stuff coming up. The draft is in, I think, less than 20 days, so we have to be back to cover the draft in the next little bit. So hopefully Sunday we get a little Pucks and Brews episode that I guess now with Patreon on hold will be out for everybody, so everybody can look forward to that one. And then we'll have some draft stuff coming up at the very least. So stay tuned for that. Hope you guys enjoyed the show for this one, a bit shorter one than Steven and I's 2.5, 3 hour podcast. So,
You're welcome, everybody, by the way.
Enjoy the break.
Yeah,
bringing Pat and Jay back means that we don't sit here and ramble for an extra hour and a half and we actually get shit done. So. Enjoy it. Thank Jay for that. Send them all your love and your messages, and we will see you guys soon.
Bye,
Bye, guys.